Alright, hi there. I just want to show three things here by way of introduction to using standards features, EasyGrade Pro. And that's creating rubrics, creating standards, and options for printing reports. The first thing, creating rubrics. Just looking at EasyGrade Pro here, hopefully by this point you're already comfortable entering students, entering assignments, all that kind of thing. So you'll be familiar with this class options tab then. This is where rubrics can be created, is in the class options. And there's a tab here for them, just adjacent to grades there. You'll notice EasyGrade Pro comes stock, or comes with a few, comes with a 4-point and a 5 for you. I've created for us what I called here a 6-point. It's actually just a variation on the 5 points. This is my 5-point rubric. This allowed me to change the language. So I've chosen language of fully meets learning goals, mostly meets learning goals, minimally meets, approaching and not yet meeting learning goals. And I've also tweaked the values over here on this right hand column just to reflect values that want to be reflected in each one of these rubric scores. Oh, sorry, and then I opened up the minimums for us as well, so that if a student has anything between a 5 and a 5.5, or 50 to 55%, they'd be approaching the learning goals, and then 56 to, what would it be? Regardless, you can play around with that on your own, but those can be edited however you want. So we can change language, we can change values. The next thing you will be able to do, if you have the new version of EasyGrade Pro, is use these auto score options. There's this little button on the bottom left. If you're running an old version, it won't be there, so you just need to go to the website and download the update for yourself. So the auto score options, if we turn on the auto score options here, this allows us, or it allows EasyGrade Pro to enter a rubric score, fully meeting, mostly meeting, etc., and we enter a score. So we enter the score or the assignment score, or whatever it might be, whatever assessment we're using, EasyGrade Pro will just fill in the rubric for us. So that's a nice thing you can have the gradebook do for you. You'll see here too, I just went in over here on the far left. This is how I created my new rubric, and I created a new item that I called for myself a work habits rubric. And I was just getting this guy set up. This would be my my work habits rubric, and I like to use this for myself to track my work habits. So I could create some work habit standards, and I could even have those displayed on their progress report and weighted at 0, so they're not affecting their overall grade, but they could be there as well. So you might want to do that first for yourself. I would suggest maybe just setting up some rubrics. This is how you go about doing it. We'll check that off our list. The next thing here is creating some standards. And I've just got a unit, a fictional unit that I put together that's going to be Vintage Connects Appreciation. And then within that unit, I've got 2 learning goals that we're going to assess here in our class. Whether students are able to identify the Canucks strengths, and whether students are able to compare and contrast the Canucks with other teams, giving examples of what sets them apart from all other teams. So what I'm doing now is I'm just highlighting the text here for our unit title. We're going to use that in our grade book. So we're going to go in here to records. This is where all our standards are going to be assembled. And again, hopefully you're familiar with the classes tab, the students tab, the assignments tab. Now we're into standards. So I called it my ID here, my identification. This is going to be Unit 1. And then my description will be this, will be Vancouver Canucks Appreciation. So I've got a name for it, I've got a description of what's happening. I also need a level. And the top level that EasyGrade Pro uses, they call a standard. This might be a little confusing because I'm using different language, so I'm going to go ahead and change the options. I'm going to call my top level a unit, and then I'm going to call the component of my major group a learning goal. We could go ahead, and use specific expectations or indicators, but I don't like using those myself. I choose not to use those. So here my unit now is Vancouver Canucks Appreciation, and its identification is 1.1. I can also play around with the rubrics that I use. Default it picked my 5-point rubric, which is perfect, that's what I want. I can play around with how the grades are calculated. I can play with whether or not this individual unit will show up on the report, and I want it there, so I'll just include it. And I can play with the weighting. Okay? So I've got my unit set up. the next thing I want is the learning goals for this unit. So I'm going to call this one 1.1, and I'm going to go back to my descriptions of my standards here. I'm just going to copy and paste this in. The student's able to identify the Canuck strengths. There's my description. Now I'm going to create 1.2. Again, it's noteworthy. This is a learning goal for Unit 1, or I just kind of stuck with the theme, stuck with what I had last time, and oh, I haven't copied it in yet. Let's go back, and let's copy this into here for 1.2. There we go. Again, I'm going to keep all the same options on the bottom, and I'm done. So my kids now, my unit and my learning goals for that unit are in. They're in my gradebook, but what I need to do now is connect these assignments with those learning goals. So that's going to happen back on the main screen, and that's going to happen under this standard. So there's two views here. There's a student view we're going to play with later, and there's an assignment view, which we're going to use right now. And we've got 3 assignments in, so I can scroll through them just like this, or I can use my drop-down menu here. So here's quiz 1.1. What I want to do is I want to connect this with a standard, and there's 2 ways to do it. I like to use this little drop-down menu. And there it is. Now it's showing the standards beside the assignment, the assessment. Here's quiz 1.2. I can also do it this way. You might be familiar with this tab again from the records view. I can go into to this drop-down menu, and I can go to 1.2 there. So 2 ways to connect them. This little tab, or this little tab right here. This little drop-down menu right here. We'll connect our tests as well. We'll connect our test with both of them. Because let's say we're testing both those learning goals on our final summative tests. So everything's good. Now we need some marks. I'm going to go through and I'm going to put in my my raw scores, my quiz scores for these students. Here we are. And you'll notice the rubric scores were filled in for us by the program as we put in the quiz scores. A nice little feature there. Now, quiz 1.2, same kind of thing. And test, I can do it the same way. I can do what I've been doing, or I can go over into this learning goal tab, and I can manually put in assessments for these learning goals. So let's say I broke my test up maybe, and I assessed these 2 learning goals independently, or I somehow assessed these 2 learning goals independently. This is where I could put in those scores. And now it's all entered. So my students now have marks based on how they performed in relation to my learning goals. What I really what I really care about now is this. I go into my student tab, and now what I can do is I can look across at how each student did for every assignment in relation to each of the learning goals. Here's our first student. The goal was, are they able to identify the Canuck strengths? On the quiz, he was mostly meeting that learning goal. On the test, he was mostly meeting that learning goal. So there's his assessment. Looks good. The other learning goal, was he able to compare and contrast with other teams? He was fully meeting that learning goal on his quiz and on his test. Fantastic. Our second student, something interesting happening here. This is where I like to ask myself kind of those formative, summative questions. And in this case, he didn't do well on his quiz, but later on he was able to demonstrate that he could meet this goal. So this is where I like to go and excuse or omit or delete that first formative mark. Gone. Now he's getting his summative mark on his test. And again, obviously that's your personal discretion, but you have that ability now because you can look at the trends and you can look at what's happening in relation to each learning goal. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to do the same thing for the fourth student. He had the same kind of marks, the same kind of trends going on. So that's how we enter our standards, that's how we create the standards, that's how we enter our marks in relation to standards. Last thing now is just printing a report. And you can email these out, you can hand these out, you can post these on the web, you can do whatever you want to do. But all your options are right in here in this print tab. And typically, you might have used these guys past. You might have used your grade summary, you might have used your assignments, but now they're relevant. And in fact, those are going to look different than what you see here, what you see in this standard chart. Those are going to reflect a different mark because we've now played around with the marks they're getting for each standard. So here's our standard chart. It's included in our report. And right now, when you look over on the right, you see the unit, Vancouver Canucks Appreciation. You see the assessment for that, mostly meeting the learning goals. And you see the 2 learning goals. Able to identify the Canuck strengths, mostly meeting able to compare and contrast, fully meeting. So we could leave it as is, or we could play around. We could add assignments in. We could add a rubric key if we want to explain to our students what each one of these values means. Or we could play around with what they see. Maybe we just want them to see the rubric score. It would look like that. Or maybe we just want them to see a numeric score. There it is there. You can also choose to just show the units. And I'm going to do that later on in my progress report. I goes home with my report cards. I might just show the units. For the year, I might just show the units. But you've got lots of options to play with there, and hopefully that helps you out in printing your reports. So thanks for watching.